what I knew is that I would eventually have to go over. I would no longer be with my platoon and the guys that I trained with. So I made the decision to go back, and my wife had supported it, but I was literally worried. We're only been married for a few months, 7 months, basically 7.5 months. Had just lost our son, and I was like, I don't know, if we make it through this, it's meant to be. Mm-hmm. And the first night I got back into Iraq and I met up with my platoon, I went out on my first night mission and got blown up that night. So in a very quick period of time, this idea of death was just around me. I had a good friend that was injured before I had gotten back. It was like just stepping from one tragedy into another traumatic situation and all of it coming together. And truthfully, when that first IED went off, I was terrified. And I realized that I had to, decide that I was okay with dying, at least for me, in order to be able to do my job. And so that night, after I got back, that following day, I sat down and I wrote letters to my parents and my wife, and just in case. And then from there, it slowly, as the days progressed, became kind of like this, all right, guys, today's the day we die. And it became a joke kind of thing. And that was just the way that I lived for well over a year. And then
it's an awful way to be in survival mode like that all the time. Hang on, Eric. We have to. We're going to go to our first break, and I'm going to stop you right there just for a second, and we'll be back with Moments of Clarity in just a moment.
You're listening to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany Werner. We welcome your input at 866-826-1340. Tiffany will be right back after this.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Did you know that your physical health plays a big role in your mental health? Healthy minds and healthy bodies go hand in hand. The problem for many is finding the time and getting the results they want. X-Force Body is perfect for people with busy schedules, with a mission to inspire you to become leaner, stronger, and in the process healthier. X-Force Body coaches will encourage, motivate, and inspire you through every workout, helping you achieve the results you desire. Learn more about X-Force Body at the grand opening of their new location in South Tampa on May 8th from 5 to 7 p.m. For more information, visit www.xforcebody.com.
Hi, this is Tiffany Werner, your host of Moments of Clarity. Living with a mental health disorder is not easy. If you or someone you know are struggling with this, please know it's so important to seek treatment, and I'm here to help. Please visit the website at momentsofclaritywithtiffany.com to view blog posts and resources on this site to help educate and inspire you to take action, because there's no shame in seeking help for mental health. While you're there, please take a few seconds to sign up for my email list. You'll get some extremely valuable educational and entertaining content that can be sent right to your inbox each week. Plus, you'll also get instant and free access to my guide on managing your anxiety. You can also follow me on Twitter at MOC with Tiffany and at Facebook at Tiffany Werner. And once again, the website is momentsofclaritywithtiffany.com. Thank you so much for your support and for listening to your show, because change can only come when we stand together as one.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
We are back to Moments of Clarity with Tiffany Werner. To join in the discussion, call 866-826-1340. Now, here's Tiffany Werner.
Hi, welcome back. And if you're just tuning in, this is Moments of Clarity. My name is Tiffany Werner. I am a licensed mental health counselor, and I'm your host. And today, before Memorial Day, we're talking about combat and post-traumatic stress. And my special guest today has fought in combat, lost more than just a few things. I was blown away by the fact that he was, serving our country when he lost his son and had to fly back and then come back and got hit by an IED, and is still here to tell the story. And I want to welcome back Eric Donoho. Thank you so much, Eric. Then
hey, how's it going?
Here I am struggling to recap that, like all shook up. That's just tragic. And then you're like, what's up? Yeah. So back to where we were. What happened when you got struck with you had said you had returned after basically burying your son and then going back because you wanted to be with your platoon. And it's one of those Murphy Law things, where you think, if I would have stayed, then, but you wouldn't have been with your platoon, but for paternity leave or anything like that. But the IED wouldn't have been there as well. But what injuries did you sustain?
So fortunately for me, that first IED, whoever buried it real deep in the ground. So the ground absorbed most of the explosion. The second IED, which I got hit on Valentine's Day 2007, they wanted to make sure that they knew I was loved. And that one,
it beats the tacky red and pink stuff, right?
Right.
Right.
So that one wasn't buried very deep and really shook me up from that point. And that's when I started getting migraines and having trouble trying to put sentences and statements out, which is when I really started using 4-letter words on a regular basis as fillers while I was searching for the right one. And then shortly before we deployed back home, I was hit with the third, which is an EFP, and that one probably did me in, and is what I was awarded a Purple Heart for. And it took a long time for me as an infantryman to accept that I should that was worthy of a Purple Heart, and because I didn't consider that as the same kind of injury as some of my other friends and what they had suffered during their deployments. So I felt like maybe I didn't really deserve that because it wasn't a real injury. It wasn't until much later, within the last 3 years, that I realized how much that injury does matter.
Right.
And so I am really thankful that our PA, who took care of our battalion, made us do it for all of us that were in that truck. Because when you get the Purple Heart, that's you get that awarded to you. It helps prove things when you go to the VA and so forth like that.
Right.
And then once I got out of the military, so I came home from war, and I was having trouble because it had only been a couple of weeks after my last EFP that it hit me, and we redeployed home, and we went.
What does EFP stand for us civilians?
So explosively formed projectile. So the best way to explain that is think of a manhole cover in the street covering the sewer. You take that big solid piece of metal, pack a whole bunch of explosives behind it, and when it goes off, that metal turns into a solid slug, and it's meant to go through armor. So when we got hit with that EFP, it actually hit our turret and lifted the entire Humvee up off the ground from the force. And fortunately, at that particular time, I was having a discussion with our LT and the gunner I was driving, and the gunner who was in the hatch was leaning down to take my side in our discussion. And had he not leaned down at the time that he did, that situation would have been a whole lot different than what it was.
Wow, that's really lucky. But still not.
Yeah,
it's amazing to hear what you guys go through and that people don't believe post-traumatic stress is real.
It absolutely is real. And for when people that we'll get there. So I deployed home. We went through what's called a post-health assessment. And when I went through that, I scored off the charts for traumatic brain injury, and post-traumatic stress, because the two kind of go hand in hand in some ways. Mm-hmm. And went on and was what's called medically flagged. So it meant that I couldn't be promoted. I couldn't be, transferred to another unit or any of those type of things until I was medically cleared by a doctor, at which point I found out that I was getting transferred to a place called the Warriors Transitions Unit, which is the Army's Wounded Warrior program. And then from there, I was basically given an option of doing a job like finance or retirement. And having talked to a friend who chose that kind of finance route, who himself was injured and went to WTU, after hearing him talk about that experience, I decided to take retirement.
Sorry. I wonder
no, you're fine.
I wonder if he's still in there. Like, I hate this job.
He's out now.
Good for him.
and he didn't last long. They ended up medically retiring him as well. But in the process, the thought pattern that I had is, well, when I'm retired, then I'll be able to have some time to put things in perspective, how everything, from life happened and how I can deal with it. But that's assuming that, like, you get out of the military and life is great, right?
Right.
And we all know life is not always that way. And so the hits kept coming, and right when I got retired, my wife and I were going to take a trip to Mexico, and she ripped her Achilles tendon in half. So I went from being in the Army to taking care of my wife with a ripped Achilles. Shortly after she was healed and kind of walking around, she became pregnant again. We had another miscarriage a few months later. And it was after that miscarriage that she found a lump in her left breast. So we went into the doctors and found out that she had a rare form of breast cancer called a Phyllodes tumor. So that next year was traveling back and forth to California. And that's kind of how life went, was just
where you couldn't catch a break
after another. No, I couldn't, because in total we've had 9 pregnancies, but we only have 2 children.
Wow.
So we had 7 stillbirths/miscarriages, the cancer, the war, injuries, and it was, for me, there was some highs and there was some lows, but in 2014, we had made a move from our house where we were living to a new house, and that's really when the spiral started to fall away, because started to happen, because I had kind of left my surroundings, and I was in a house that was in the middle of nowhere, so isolation was kind of normal in that situation. And then I moved from that into a subdivision with a whole lot of people, a whole lot of kids, and I didn't really enjoy that. And then a little while after being in that house, my wife's employer transferred us to Indiana, where I was born and raised. And I had spent most of my adult life trying to get out of Indiana. So the idea of going back to Indiana, it just wasn't awesome. And then we moved to Indiana, and we ended up buying a house that previous owners had hit a lot of problems. And so the next thing I know, we're having to do a bathroom redo for black mold. There's a mouse infestation we're having
the
to
money
do.
pit.
It was absolutely a money pit. And, by the time that all of this kind of was coming to a head and all these changes, everything, my world was upside down. And I wasn't happy. I wasn't inspiring. My wife and I were arguing all the time. My kids didn't really want to be around me.